I think Barlow, I'm sure, will thank some folks, but maybe on behalf of us, I'd like to thank Jennifer for all the work she's done here. It's great, and thank TCC, and then those of you who are involved in putting the exhibition together and hanging the work. I really appreciate that. I know how much work it is to put together an exhibition, and Jennifer's been really patient with Barlow and I as we've experimented with a collaborative show. So I think that's probably where I'll jump off and begin speaking. So I met Barlow. I'm still somewhat new to Washington. I've been here for about 3 years. And I met Barlow soon after I got here. He just sent me an email and said, hey, exchange studio visits. And I think I emailed him back and I said, well, how about I come check out your studio, because I'm working in a bathroom. I'm still in that bathroom, but things are going to change soon. So the point is, I don't often invite people to my studio because there's not much to see there except for this big pile of junk. So I want to talk about Barlow's work here. That's how I want to start. So let's get out of this section and go over here.
And I want to be ignoring you. You're going to talk about my work.
Okay. I doubt I'll say anything that Barlow hasn't already heard. Barlow and I have become great friends. I'm really glad that he contacted me and that we got together and spent, hours after hours talking about art. And so the first thing I want to say about Barlow's work, I've come to get to know it pretty well. The first thing I want to say is that and you can smack me if you want to, but its natural home really is in Barlow's studio. That's where the work is best seen. And that takes into account how lovely it looks in here and how well it's been displayed. And in Barlow's studio, it's not this well displayed, right? It's not. But it's like its ingenious qualities are even more apparent than they are here. So Barlow has all of these he would call them tools. I would like to call them contraptions that are sort of handmade by him. And he's got huge easels on casters. And these things are, some of them are 10 feet long enough to fit, his biggest paintings. And there's what, 2 or 3 of those? I think you've got 3, right? Two? Only 2? They're huge. Okay, so you can kind of roll them into this spot, and then when you want to work on this painting, Barlow rolls it out, and then he works on it. And both sides of these things will have giant paintings on them. So they can accommodate, 4 huge paintings, or sometimes he'll have his triptychs on them too. And I love seeing that. I love going into Barlow's studio and just sort of sitting amongst his work. And his entire house is consumed by his work, right? He lives in his studio, which is actually a house, but it's really a studio. So that was sort of the first thing that blew me away the first time I went to Barlow's house, where just the whole thing is his studio and how amazing it's set up, and the ambitiousness of what he does and the dedication he has as an artist. And that being said, at a quick glance, you already know Barlow can paint really well, right? It doesn't take long to figure that out. The next thing that I wanted to know about Barlow's work is the subject matter. Where are these people coming from? Where are these spaces coming from? And like these behind you here, Johnny, are pretty apparent when you're in the space. So this is one of the reasons that I think Barlow's work is best viewed in his house/studio, is because you see some of the tools and contraptions that I was talking about earlier. Obviously this back here is a pretty straightforward easel, right? But all of this stuff that he has in his house makes it into his paintings. So that's the first thing you gather, is that, oh, okay, he's painting his studio, which again, isn't really a studio, it's a house. So there's a lot of things in there that you wouldn't find in sort of the typical studio, because it's also it's a domestic, it's where he lives. And then you start discovering that, hey, wait a minute, didn't I just see this painting, 10 minutes ago over on the other side of the house. So you realize that he's taking paintings and putting them into new paintings, and sometimes these things go 3 and 4 paintings deep. And then you realize that's not the full formula. You start getting these medallions that are inserted, and what are they, thought bubbles? Are they like a different temperament that he can insert? Is it just a different headspace? I'm sure Barlow would cringe if we continued to unpack that and overanalyze it, so I won't. But these are the things that I noticed, These are the things that I started to notice right off the bat. And then I was fortunate to get to know Barlow, not just his work, but to get to know the artist. And I realized that a lot of these people, and it didn't really surprise me, but it just brought context. A lot of the people that he inserts into his work are people that he has relationships with. All of the people that appear in this painting, I know who they are now, right? They're people who are close to Barlow. If you want to flip around and look over here, sorry for making you move around so much. With Tarzan, these aren't contemporary folks, and maybe they aren't even people who actually, have a real lived history, but they come from comic book heroes or characters from Barlow's youth, or characters that he's just encountered in his life. Whether they are real people who he has an actual relationship with, or characters out of a book that he has, a different kind of relationship. These are the people that kind of appear in his paintings. And I think that starts to become kind of obvious, a point of intersection that Barlow and our work shares, is that I think we realized pretty early on that we kind of did the same thing in terms of our subject matter. We're grabbing things that are close to us in our lives, and that becomes a subject matter. There's a lot of family members and friends that appear in Barlow's work, and the same thing happens in mine. Now, let's see. From there, so moving beyond subject matter, I think Barlow takes a lot of pleasure. I don't know, is that the right word? Is pleasure the right word? Okay, we'll go with that. Wait, you're not allowed to talk. Okay. Not yet. It takes a lot of pleasure in the process. Again, I think this is evident in his studio. You get to see his palette laid out, and his paint tubes where I don't think Barlow doesn't just kind of stop at the convenience of the way the tubes are manufactured, right? He has to build these little implements that the tubes fit into, so it's really customized in that way. But he takes a lot of pleasure in the process of making a painting, and I know he really gets into the layers, he gets into the colors, he doesn't set up a painting and work wholeheartedly at it, finish it, and then move on to the next one. He's got, these probably, in his mind, these may not even be finished. I have no idea. I think there's a lot of works in progress in here, but he may say, well, right now it's finished, but it may change in the future. You've got that thing going on. But he'll spend an hour or two, half an hour, whatever is on his egg timer that day in front of a painting, and he'll work on it until that thing buzzes, and then he'll go take a break, and then he'll move on to the next painting. Right? So he's kind of moving from painting to painting, and I hear him say this often. He'll approach the painting and he said, I can't figure out where I was last time. Like, it takes me 10, 15, 20 minutes just to figure out where I left off. And I think he really enjoys that confusion and those disjunctions in the process. And that stuff is evident in the sort of wonky perspectives you get in his pieces. Barlow, I don't think he pursues any kind of spatial discomfort on purpose. It just kind of happens, and in his work, it's subtle, right? You realize if you look at these long enough that you can't actually step into these spaces they're just off enough. There's some fisheye stuff going on. There's some things that should be plumb that are coming plumb, and then they kind of go brrr, and they twist off over here. And that's sort of an organic happening. But then, of course, then the question becomes, I know Barlow observes that kind of thing happening because we've talked about it, and then I wonder, as the artist, you know, does a person find themselves like playing that up and then freaking out because, oh man, what was happening organically now, I'm fully aware it's happening, so is it organic anymore? Those kinds of things happen. I would guess Barlow, you know, dances with that devil often as well. But do you folks see any of those instances? I'm trying to look for like a really clear sort of spatial distortion without moving you over to the other gallery, because I'm thinking of one painting that does it really well. I don't know if you brought it actually, Barlow. Oh, maybe that one isn't here, that big interior, right, with the shag carpet. You didn't bring that one?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Anyways, keep an eye out for those. And I think some of that also happens because Barlow, in the same way that his subject matter is very close to him, and he references things that are close to him with the subject matter, his reference material, the things he actually works directly from, like drawings, are drawings that he's already worked up. Like they're these nice little sort of compositions that stand on their own and are works of art. And then he takes them, and I kind of like this part of the process, of your process, Barlow, and he does a Photoshop thing to them. Like he photographs them and he'll put them into Photoshop, and then he'll print them up and mount them on a foam core, and then that'll be his reference when he blows them up and puts them in a large painting, which I think is really funny because they all come from him, right? He's not working from a photograph, he's working from his own drawing, but then he puts it in Photoshop and prints it up and then works from an electronic version of his own hand. I think that's hilarious. I love it.
You think it's hilarious?
I do. I love that kind of stuff, right?
No,
like the ghost in the machine. As an artist working contemporarily, you have to deal with those issues, I think, or you stand the chance of being utterly obsolete. And what I love, the thing I love about Barlow doing that is that he works in this really old sort of traditional style of developing a modella, but then he puts it into Photoshop. And I don't know if we haven't actually had that conversation of using technology but working in an old-fashioned way, have we? I don't know if we've directly had that conversation.
Well, we've sort of taken it for granted. It's fallen into our conversation, but not in a conscious way. I mean, you want to take a break?
Yeah, I'm going to step out of the way and let you go. That seems like a good... Totally. This is terrifying.
Have this for a little bit. That means I get to talk about your stuff now, too.
Let's talk about yours for a second, though.
Well, just to
You need an answer.
Just to get a little clarity on what you're saying about this process. You know, when I was a kid and dealing with images like that as my reality, okay, these were my fantasies. Roman soldiers, you know, Tarzan, that was my superhero group. And so at age 5 or so, when my dad was buying comic books and reading them to me, that's where I got my sense of being an artist. I didn't know what an artist was, certainly, but I wanted to do that. I want to make that kind of stuff. Some of these images they're direct from that. I just access them directly, and you know, and I love them. But in making those pictures, I wanted to draw. Like Michelangelo, you know, like my heroes, who became artists. You know, they were artists that I wanted to be and wanted to perform like that. And I don't know, there was very little conscious energy involved, just your natural things. So for years, I made big pictures. Most of my life was making the thing as I understood it. And this is even with an art history education and everything. It wasn't really sinking in until spending enough time with contemplating how, say, Michelangelo painted the Sistine ceiling, you know. When I got past all the movie romances about this and started thinking about how was that stuff actually done, well, there's a man on a ladder trying to make a big picture out of a little picture, basically. And what was he carrying around to work with? About something that he could hold in his hand when he wasn't just freehanding it himself anyway. But there was a process attached. And it took a lifetime to come to understand what that process is. And so the things that Nathan's talking about, using photographs, well, I had my stuff. I take a picture of my stuff so that I could print it on a little card and do whatever it is I want with it, and that would become my source for doing a painting in the studio. I've made paintings like this on the big easel, looking around the painting at my subject, you know, and doing that way. And I love to work that way, but there's another way of doing it that we're talking about. And I was into this process around the time that I encountered Nathan. Now, on this wall over here where these paintings are, there was a show 3 summers ago, it was going into the 4th, where some young man from, I didn't know who he was or where he came from, had a stunning piece on there, and it turned out to be Nathan. I was so disturbed by that piece, you know, because it was so good, all right, that I had to get to the bottom of it, right? How could I sleep at night? How could I live knowing there was somebody in my vicinity who could work like that, you know? And it relates to, you know, to, I don't know, I come from a kind of literary, academic, kind of pretentious tradition, and the concept of influence is very strong in me. I would say my ideas for pictures and paintings come out of school and history and that kind of stuff, rather than out of just encountering natural phenomenon and the natural world. That's more his department, okay? But, you know, in doing that, I saw Nathan's work. I have to meet this guy. You know, I got in touch with him, and he came to my studio, and we realized that we really liked each other, and that there was something about our work that really resonated with each us. And so come with me and I'll show you what some of that stuff is, where I saw the connections. This stuff is just stunning, you got to admit. This work is just so beautiful. You can get right up on it. You can get up onto any of these pieces and see how gorgeously they're done. They're just beautiful. I just love them. It's a illustrative graphic style. The paint is applied very carefully and very expertly on the painted surfaces. The architecture of these pieces is stunning. The sculptural work is all considered, and these are compositions. They're composed, they're thought out. There were strategies that were used to arrive at images like this. And I fell more and more in love with them as I saw them, and I saw his work in smaller pieces, and in this beautiful frieze over here, where I'm happy to say that many of these were in Nathan's quiver. They were in his workshop whenever I met him, but this was in very early phases the time that I met him, and it has expanded like this since we've known each other. But at any rate, in these things, I sensed connections with the kind of work I do, where the things that I do tend to be reflections on top of reflections, and where I make pictures within pictures. I see the same kind of thing in Nathan's work, where images are compounded and explored almost as the same image on top of the image on top of the image, a slight change here and there. This is what Picasso and the Cubists did, right? Except we have an artist here who's not taking just a crude approximation, but actually going in like a very, very acute technician and giving different angles, different concentrations of some of the same material, something like this. I mean, look at that. That is just so, that's so beautiful. I just love that. And the love that went into it is what I pick up on, and it's what I appreciate as a viewer. And that's another thing that I think connects Nathan and me, because I know what got him excited in my studio was he saw, come on, we're all basically like kids at heart. And what he saw there was like a playground of all the stuff that he likes to do. And I sort of see it in his work too. When we get together and talk about our work, we certainly don't talk in technical terms. I mean, we talk about other things, soccer, his kids and stuff like that. We rarely talk about art because we're doing it. You know, we just feel close, so we're just doing what we do. The influence rubs off incidentally and very, very casually. But here's something that let's say you might be able to relate to. In this, I sense a pattern that could extend all the way around this room. It could keep on going and going and going. It's continuous. The imagery there is enough of it here for you to get a sense that this is the way this thing could go. It could keep going this way and this way and this way. I wonder what else this guy's going to put in here. I'm all excited about that because that is the way he works. He works like Darwin, or like a scientist on a voyage. He gets so interested in the visual aspect of the things that he's looking at, and also in the anthropological and the biological aspects. His examinations take him right into those things, and I feel that he's examining them with a more acute and critical eye than most of us do. We let these things pass by, but he gets caught in them, and his hypnotics and his trances are in the structural minutia and vagaries of the objects that he creates. He just goes right in there, and in a thing like this where I'm saying I love it so much, you may be wondering what is he getting out of this that's so exciting, but you'll agree. I mean, you just look at it for a while and you'll see that this is a wonderful trip. There's some noses and eyes and lots of material there to work with, but when you see how those images are brought out and how the artist has thoroughly enjoyed the ride of making those things, that's where you really begin to enjoy it. There's feeling in that. I call it emotion even. I say it's organized into an emotion. Where I'm coming from on that, it almost doesn't matter what the subject matter is. When you see something like this, in the case of representational artists like Nathan and myself, when you see that at work and you get into deeper than the imagery, into the techniques and the work, the craft that goes into it, you're given an opportunity for a sensual enjoyment and for emotions and feelings that go beyond mere subject matter. They're the reasons for cherishing things that are as well made as these are. So the sumo wrestlers, with a mechanical drawing, with a profiled, silhouetted forest, with sky, and with hints and suggestions of connections, whether they're metaphysical connections, whether they are science fiction projections, or whether they are something from the fabric of this artist's subconscious that are working their way into his fascination, his sphere of things where that he likes to depict. Whatever they are, his combinations of these things make these really, really fascinating pictures. But in this case, here's a connection. I see this, at so many points along the line, a pattern, a pattern that could be a design or a structure or something by which you come to understand a possible way of perceiving the world, a universe, a vision. It can happen through these things. They may be fits and starts, they may have bumps, they may be irregular, but if you gaze at these things enough and long enough, you start to get the sense that there's a unified vision going on. There's a sense of just knowing when it's right, how they fall into balance and such. So I attempt things like that variously, and you could just take the camera right around and catch this action right here. Hi, come on in, come on in. These three canvases that are out here in the front that have got the dancing guy in the middle with the two on the end, those are three pieces that I did in a way where I was pursuing a decoration. I thought I had arrived at something that could be a motif and that could pass on something of that sense. While you're standing here, I think if you look at the sumo wrestlers over there and you look at the dancing artists there, it may kind of connect with what I'm stumbling through, and what I'm trying to say is, in this case, I have three separate paintings, and there are different takes on what people think triptychs and polyptych pictures are. Some say maybe it's a continuous set of panels where an image just rides past one, into another one, into another one. It's all one big picture, and it's just divided by some principle that the artist settled on, or maybe the architecture of the room in which the painting was created settled on. But there are other takes on the polyptych, multi-paneled form where they're completely different pictures, but they're related like cousins. And they fit together that way. Most of my work is like that. That's what the Tarzan thing is about. And that's kind of what was going on here. But I think you can also sense in that particular picture that those images form a kind of thing that, if you're familiar with toile, a pattern in textile work where there is an image or a couple of images and they are reproduced in such a way that they form a pattern, even though they are pictures. That's an old tradition. It was kind of that I was kind of pursuing there. But it strikes me that I'm doing it in a kind of traditional, old-fashioned way, and Nathan does this with a completely new look. You know, it belongs to another generation of perceptions and of treatments. And it kind of spells a difference in approaches we have. And yet, you know, I feel very close to this artist for doing stuff like that. I don't know, I think I'm done with my part. I need a breath or something. You want to come in and say something?
I bet some folks have questions.
Questions or something? Anybody? I'm sorry, what was that?
What brand of oil paint do you like to use?
What brand of oil paint?
Yeah, because I like the colors and I like the vividness.
I use just about anything handy, mostly Winsor Newton stuff, you know. Honestly, I can't say that I have like the finest of paints and materials. I don't import lapis lazuli from anywhere or anything like that. I'm pretty standard. But I don't paint. There's not a heck of a lot of paint on here, you know. There's enough to cover surface, but I don't do like really thick impasto work and stuff like that. A lot of my work is fairly transparent, and I think you can see the grid lines in so much of this stuff. They're kind of part of my design. I want them visible.
Canvases?
Oh yeah. And that's another thing.
Available for hire?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm available for consultation on it. You wouldn't want to hire me to do it, but I'll show you how I make those. Yeah, if you're interested in knowing. It's another thing I'd like to share, as long as I'm running on and on and on with you, is that The shop talk aspect, I say Nathan and I don't talk much about art, we talk about other stuff. He just built a shed in his backyard that it's to die for. I mean, imagine this kind of sensibility gone into the craftsmanship of a simple structure, you know, a tool shed or something like that. It's good stuff, okay? And that's what's, you know, it's that kind of stuff and that kind of sensibility that I relate to very, very strongly with. Yeah, I make my materials and stuff. I stretch my canvas and all that stuff. He prepares his stuff. We start from the ground up with the things that we do. But it's a very comfortable place to be. You know, with another artist, you like sharing those things. You get a lot of comfort and a lot of reinforcement in what you're doing that way, certainly. Nathan's great. He can build anything. Look at these things that he built. He's terrific. Yeah. Well, he's a lot more capable of scrambling up and down ladders at this point than I am, so there's another recommendation for him.
Thanks.
Hi, Susan. How you doing? Well, please come in. I didn't mean to chase everybody out into the front thing. Come on in. Anna, how you doing? Great to see you. Hey, Nathan. Did you have something to say? I clearly do need a break. I want to escape this for a second.
Let's see. Shoot, I had a thought earlier. So,
Come on out here a little bit.
well, how about, do you have questions? Do you have any more questions? Just like throw them out there, or if you don't have questions, that's fine. And we can just kind of mingle. Yeah. Yeah. That's, I'm all out.
Question.
Okay. Oh yeah, this is a good idea. If you will all
My question is,
don't mind us having questions for each other.
the frieze, for example, looks pretty complete. It looks like it has pretty much established the language that you want it to be executed in. But I know that because it's your process is to follow and discover, you got any sensations about where this frieze is going and how it might be moving? Because I see it as something that will continue to grow. Am I right about that?
Yeah, probably, unless I get pulled in a different direction. But this has kind of kept my interest for the better part of 4 years. And I come and go with this. It's really nice, I will say, to have it, let's see, I had it up at Susan's place when it was minus a few panels. It's got more panels now, but every so often, it looks like maybe every year or so, and again, everyone's humoring me with this, I drag this thing out because I've run out of space in my working area to see it all put together. So, when I was packing it up to bring it over here to Jennifer, I had to double check. I had to kind of lay it out along the longest wall I could and then have it run over here and make sure that I had the panel numbering decided. And it switches too. So I'll tell you, what I do like to do, and I'm not gonna hold myself to this, but I'll usually develop 2 or 3 panels at once, right? So like these faces happened at the same time, the hands happened together. Most recently, like this little guy here is part of that, right? They were painted next to each other. This one kind of happened on its own, and then it's fun to pull them apart and reinsert them in different places, flip them upside down. So that's kind of the mode that it's fallen into. And if that kind of process gains too much momentum, chances are that I will mess with that, just to keep myself interested. That's what happens. Let's see, was I telling you this, Johnny? Yeah, like with the portraits, some of these, like the teeth over there behind Barlow, if that's what you see them as, and they look like an upside down smile, right? Those have a schematic a one-to-one schematic that I use to trace onto board and then cut out the pieces on a jigsaw and stuff like that, right? So components will be planned out with the schematic because maybe there's no way to kind of realize them without doing that. But like the whole, the entire thing, it doesn't really have a plan. It's guided more by maybe the story behind them, like the person who is serving as the portrait, my relationship with that person. So the actual object, its development is kind of driven by in my case, the relationship that I have with that person, and kind of exploring memories, attributes that I observe in them, shared experiences, things like that. Over here, these two, I don't have a whole lot of shared experience with these two because they died before I was born, but these are ancestors. I've been going back in time lately. I think inevitably I'll go forward in time with some of these, like progeny. What the hell would that look like? And I've got, my family is here, they ran off. I think, are they out there? Yeah. Hey, Jill? Is that her? That's not Jill. Okay, anyways, I think they thought they were going to disturb us, and chances are, in some way they might have, but that might have been fun too. So I've got 3 children, they're over here. Are they going to have children? What would those children look like? Barlow is a part of this. We're not related by blood, but does that matter? Right? Interesting question I hadn't considered until I bumped into Barlow and decided I wanted to add him to Strangely Familial. So, what's the definition of a tribe for me? All of these little branching off points are places that I could go with these, and I'm still kind of stuck in this series, I gotta admit it. Although I think I've got some big paintings in me now. But anyway, back to these two. So my great-great-great-grandfather, my great-great-great-grandmother, John Pack, sort of a notable early Mormon, had 8 wives, and this was his first wife, who is my biological great-great-great-grandmother. I'm not sure, like, how do I treat his other 7 wives, like, personally? I'm not sure how I feel about that. And sort of approaching her portrait was interesting because I want to do her justice as an individual and not overly focus on her circumstances. Kind of the same thing as my great-great-great-grandfather, right? And you can apply these to all of the people that are your ancestors, right? We can take our sort of contemporary points of views and we can sort of despise their lives or judge their lives or love their lives or hail their lives as fantastic. And of course I have that in me, but I don't want that to be kind of the overriding direction I take with any of these. So a lot of them kind of explode. They explore a lot of those aspects, right? The things that I do find kind of disturbing, or the things that I find that should be noted, that you could applaud, maybe not because they're socially acceptable, but because they are so far outside of the normal bell curve that, hey, we better make note of that. Like, this guy's 43 children. The process that he got them, we could talk about all night. But the fact that he had 43 children is pretty fantastical. Like, that's bizarre to me, right? So all of these things sort of play into the way that I explore these paintings. And I suppose anything is in play as far as like materials, although I wouldn't claim to have that range of facility. But if if something got my attention and the concept demanded it, I would be up for trying out a new thing, whether it's some sort of wacky found object or a different media or a different way of building these things. I would be up for that. And I got to be honest, at this point they are sort of falling into this range. They're getting a little predictable. So what's going to start uprooting that? I don't know. But those are the things that keep me interested in being an artist.